Billionaire Hale sat in his golden mansion, glass of wine in hand, laughing at the maid's daughter who wandered too close to the grand piano. "Stay away, little girl. Music isn't for people like you," he sneered. The guests laughed, but what none of them knew, what would silence his billionaire forever, was that the girl carried a secret so powerful, a melody so haunting, that once her fingers touched those keys, the entire house would tremble. And nothing in Hale's empire would ever be the same again. Amara, the maid's daughter, had grown up in silence. She watched Hale's mansion from the shadows, dusting floors, carrying trays, and serving guests who barely noticed her existence. To them, she was invisible, just a servant's child, a background figure in their glamorous lives. But Amara had something none of them could see. Behind her quiet eyes lived a gift. A fire passed down from her late father, a pianist whose music once shook concert halls before poverty buried his name. The grand piano in Hale's hall stood untouched, more decoration than instrument. For years, Amara had only dared to glance at it, brushing her fingers across the wood, when no one watched. The keys called to her, but the rules of the house chained her away. Until one night, it was a gala evening. Hale, dressed in his finest, entertained investors and celebrities. The room glittered with wealth, champagne flowing, laughter rising like smoke. Amara carried a tray of glasses through the crowd, ignored as always, until her foot slipped, a glass crashing to the marble floor. Every eye turned. Hale's face hardened. "Pathetic," he barked. "You can't even serve properly? You're just a maid's kid. Don't touch anything you don't deserve, especially my piano." The guests laughed again, cruel and sharp. Amara's cheeks burned, but her eyes drifted to the piano. Something inside her snapped. Not anger, not rebellion, but destiny. She walked forward, her small frame trembling, and placed her hands on the keys. Hale scoffed. "What do you think you're doing?" But then, sound. The first note rang out, pure and heavy, filling the air like thunder before a storm. The guests froze. Another note followed, then another, weaving into a melody that wrapped itself around the walls, crawling under their skin. It wasn't just music. It was truth. The chandelier trembled above. Glasses shook on silver trays. And Hale, for the first time in years, felt powerless. Amara's fingers danced with a force no one could deny. Her music carried grief, rage, beauty, and something more, something hidden that Hale recognized too late. This wasn't just performance. It was revenge, and it was only the beginning. The last note still lingered in the air. Amara's hands lifted from the keys, trembling, but the music seemed alive, stretching through the chandelier, crawling into the golden walls, and pressing itself into every chest in the room. The crowd had fallen into silence. The same people who laughed seconds ago now sat frozen, their glasses half raised, their mouths slightly open. Some blinked in disbelief, some shifted uncomfortably, and some were visibly shaken, as though the melody had stirred memories they'd buried long ago. But no one was more shaken than Hale. The billionaire's glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor. His face, usually stretched with arrogance, had twisted into something raw. Fear, recognition, maybe even guilt. He gripped the edge of his chair as though the music itself was pulling him underwater. "Enough!" Hale barked, though his voice cracked. He rose quickly, clapping his hands once. "Enough of this nonsense. She's just a maid's child." Stop staring at her. But no one moved. Instead, a trembling voice broke the silence. Where did you learn to play like that?" one of the investors asked, eyes wide. Amara's chest rose and fell with quick breaths. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. Dozens of eyes clung to her, not with mockery, but with awe. Still, she didn't answer. She simply looked at Hale, her gaze sharp, unblinking. And that was when he knew. This wasn't chance. This girl was not only a pianist. She was his problem. The whispers began. As the party broke into chaos, the whispers grew louder. "She plays like a master. She must have been trained." "Impossible. She's just a servant's child." "No, I've heard that melody before. Years ago, wasn't it?" Hale slammed his fist on the piano lid. silencing them. "Everyone out," he snarled. "Party's over." But the damage was done. The whispers would leave with the guests, spreading like fire across the city. A maid's daughter, playing music that could shake chandeliers? Something about it felt dangerous, uncontrollable. And deep down, Hale knew why. That melody, the one Amara had just unleashed, wasn't random. It was the piece. The one he had buried. The one he had destroyed lives to erase. The hidden past. Back in her small quarters, Amara sat alone. Her mother, the maid, rushed in, fear etched across her face. "Amara, what have you done? Do you know what that music means?" Amara's eyes glistened. "It means the truth," she whispered. Her mother grabbed her hands. "That melody belonged to your father. He wrote it before Hale stole it." The words hung heavy. Hale had stolen her father's masterpiece, passed it off as his own commission, and when the truth threatened to come out, her father was blacklisted, pushed into ruin until illness and poverty claimed his life. Hale had erased him, and now, standing before the piano, Amara had brought him back, the billionaire's fear. Meanwhile, Hale paced his private study like a predator cornered. His phone buzzed with calls from investors demanding answers. Some wanted to know about the girl. Others wanted recordings. One simply said, "If she plays again, you could lose everything." Hale slammed the phone down. His empire wasn't built on truth. It was built on lies, on stolen brilliance, on silencing voices like Amara's father. And now, the dead man's daughter threatened to expose it all, with nothing but her hands on the keys. "She thinks she can humiliate me in my own house," he muttered, eyes dark. "No, not again. She will never play again." The invitation. 2 days later, Amara was summoned, not by Hale, but by someone who had been at the party. A woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. Clara Devon, a music critic notorious for tearing apart performers. Yet, when Amara stepped nervously into the critic's office, Clara leaned forward with a spark of excitement. "That night when you played, do you realize what you did?" Amara shook her head. Clara smirked. "You shook a house built on gold. That's not music, child. That's war." She handed Amara a card. "There's a competition. The world stage. Play there, and you won't just shake a house. You'll shatter an empire. Hale can't bury the truth if the whole world hears it." Amara hesitated. Her hands trembled. The world? She had never been outside Hale's shadow, let alone stood before thousands. But the thought of her father, forgotten and erased, filled her veins with fire. She nodded. Hale's countermove. That night, Hale received news of the competition. His face darkened as he read Clara Devon's name attached to it. "Of course," he hissed. "The vulture smells blood." He called his assistant. "By the judges. Shut it down. If she dares touch another piano, she'll regret it. Do you understand? Regret it." But deep inside, Hale wasn't just angry. He was terrified, because the melody Amara played wasn't just music. It was evidence. And if anyone discovered where it came from, his empire of lies would crumble overnight. The training begins. For weeks, Amara practiced in secret with Clara guiding her. Every note was sharpened, every pause given weight. Clara drilled her like a soldier preparing for battle. "You're not just playing music," Clara told her. "You're speaking truth. Make them feel it. Make them choke on it." Amara's hands blistered. Her back ached, but she refused to stop. Every chord was her father's voice rising from the grave. Every melody was justice clawing its way into daylight. And somewhere deep inside, she felt a strange power growing. Not just skill, but command. The ability to move hearts, to tear down walls, to make the mighty tremble. The stage awaits. The night of the competition arrived. A grand hall, lights blazing, cameras rolling, the world watching. Amara stood backstage, her heart pounding louder than any drum. She peeked through the curtain, and there he was, Hale, sitting in the front row, his eyes locked on her like daggers, his smile cold and thin. He wasn't here to watch. He was here to bury her, once and for all. Amara closed her eyes, took a breath, and when her name was called, She walked on the stage with quiet steps but thunder in her chest. The audience whispered, some mocking, some curious. The maid's daughter? A child no one knew? Hale leaned back in his chair, smirking, but Amara sat at the piano, her fingers hovering above the keys. The lights dimmed, the world hushed, and as her first note struck, low, deep, haunting, something inside the hall shifted. The same tremor from Hale's mansion returned. The air itself seemed to vibrate. The audience leaned forward, as if pulled by invisible strings, and Hale's smirk faded, because he realized this wasn't just a performance. It was a reckoning, the song of shadows. The hall was silent, not a whisper, not a cough, only the sound of Amara's fingers pressing down on the first keys. The melody began low, quiet, like a whisper carried on the wind. Then it grew. Layer upon layer of sound cascaded from her hands, rising like waves of storm. Every note cut through the audience like glass. The critic Clara Devon, sitting on the edge of her seat, smirked. She's doing it, she thought. She's not just playing, she's commanding. But Hale? Hale's face drained of color. He sat frozen in the front row, clutching the arms of his chair, so tightly his knuckles turned white, because Hale recognized this piece. It wasn't just music. It was evidence. The composition belonged to Amara's father, a work Hale had stolen decades ago, buried under forged contracts and silenced witnesses. He had sworn it would never resurface. Yet here it was, alive again, reborn to the hands of the girl he once dismissed as just a maid's kid. The attempted sabotage. Backstage, a man in a dark suit tapped his earpiece. Hale's orders were clear. Make sure she doesn't finish. The man crept toward the lighting controls, preparing to cut power mid-performance. Another figure slipped closer to the stage, ready to create a technical accident. Hale had planned everything, but Amara kept playing. Her music had a force of its own. The first chandelier trembled. The audience gasped as glasses rattled on tables. Coats shivered against their owners' shoulders. It was as though the building itself listened. Then, snap, the saboteur reached for the main power line. But the moment his hand touched it, sparks exploded. The hall's lights flickered, but the piano burned brighter. The spotlight clung to Amara, illuminating her in golden fire. The crowd erupted in astonishment, believing it part of the show. Clara leaned forward, whispering to herself, she's untouchable. The melody's secret. As the piece climbed toward its peak, Amara's fingers moved faster, striking chords so sharp they cut the air. But hidden in the storm of notes was a pattern, a code her father had woven into the music long ago. The audience only heard beauty. Hale heard the truth. Every repetition of theme, every dissonant pause, every furious cascade. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. It was a message her father had left behind, locked inside the music, waiting for someone brave enough to release it. A message that proved Hale's theft. And Hale knew if someone cracked it, his empire would burn. The audience awakens. By the second movement, tears rolled down faces in the audience. Hardened businessmen wept quietly. Influential women clutched their pearls, trembling. Even the youngest children stared with wide, unblinking eyes. The judges whispered among themselves, one muttering, "This isn't just talent, it's something greater." Another whispered back, "This could change everything we know about music." The performance wasn't just stunning, it was historic. And then it happened. One of the older judges, his memory sharp despite the years, leaned forward suddenly. His face went pale. "I know this song," he breathed. "I've heard it before, decades ago." But it was written by... His words trailed off, but his eyes cut toward Hale. The billionaire stiffened, rage boiling beneath his polished smile. The billionaire cracks. Hale couldn't take it anymore. He rose to his feet, interrupting the performance. "This is fraud," he shouted, his voice shaking. "This girl, she's nothing. A servant's child, a thief, a liar." The crowd turned on him with gasps and murmurs. No one interrupted music like this, not unless they were desperate. Amara's fingers never faltered. She played through his shouting, her melody rising louder, drowning his words. Clara Devon stood, pointing at Hale. "No, The only thief here is you. The audience erupted in chaos. The unstoppable finale. The music surged toward its climax. Amara's body shook with the force of it, every muscle taut, every note burning with the fire of her father's legacy. She wasn't just playing for herself. She was playing for every silenced voice, every erased story, every stolen dream. And then the final cascade came. Her fingers blurred across the keys, striking chords so furious, so relentless, that the chandelier above shattered, raining crystals across the stunned audience. No one screamed. No one ran. They were transfixed. As the last note rang out, a piercing cry that seemed to split the air. Silence fell. Utter silence. And then thunderous applause. The crowd leapt to their feet, shouting, crying, clapping until the hall shook again. Hale's desperation. But Hale wasn't clapping. His empire trembled like the chandelier before it. He pushed past the seats, storming toward the exit, his phone already at his ear. "Destroy her," he hissed, "before she destroys me. I don't care what it takes." Yet even as he barked orders, a terrifying thought gnawed at him. What if it's too late? Because once a secret is played into the world, you can't unhear it. And Amara had just given the world the key to his downfall. The night of Amara's performance spread like wildfire across the city. By dawn, her name was everywhere. The Maid's daughter who silenced a billionaire. Clips of her playing flooded social media. Hashtags trended worldwide. And buried within the whispers, one truth began surfacing. This melody wasn't Hale's. It never had been. The awakening. Journalists dug deep, comparing Amara's performance with old, forgotten compositions. One article hit the front page. Evidence emerges. Hale's greatest work may be stolen. By the next morning, investors were pulling out, contracts were crumbling, and the billionaire's empire shook under the weight of truth. Meanwhile, Amara sat in Clara Devon's quiet apartment, staring at her blistered hands. They hurt, but she smiled through the pain. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. Her mother touched her shoulder gently. "Your father would be proud." Amara's eyes welled with tears. "No, he's here. Every time I play, he's here." Hale's final move. But Hale wasn't finished. He still had power, connections, and enough money to wage war. He stood before cameras, his suit immaculate, voice steady. "This child is a fraud, a nobody. She wants to ruin me with lies. My empire will stand." Yet even as he spoke, his hand shook. The press noticed. The world noticed. And then the judge in the competition stepped forward. An old man, carrying with him a weathered notebook. "I remember this song," he said, voice trembling but clear. "It was written by a man named Elijah, Amara's father. I saw the manuscript with my own eyes before it was stolen." Gasps filled the room. Hale's mask cracked. The collapse. What followed was swift. Lawsuits. Investigations. Investors fleeing like rats from a sinking ship. Within weeks, Hale's empire, once untouchable, crumbled into dust. His mansion sold, his assets frozen, his name dragged through every headline not as a genius, but as a thief. For Hale, the silence was deafening. For Amara, the silence was freedom. The last performance. Months later, in a hall far larger than Hale's mansion, Amara sat at a grand piano. The audience was not of billionaires and corrupt elites. It was ordinary people, families, dreamers, children who had once been invisible like her. She closed her eyes and played again, not with rage this time, but with peace. The same melody, her father's song, flowed freely into a world where it always belonged. The hall filled with light. Every note soared like wings breaking chains. When she finished, the applause didn't just shake the room. It shook history. Epilogue. Some said Hale was last seen in a cheap suit, hiding from the cameras, muttering about revenge. Others said he simply disappeared, swallowed by the very silence he once used to destroy others. But Amara? She became a name etched in legacy. Not just a pianist, not just a maid's daughter, but the girl who silenced a billionaire and gave music back its truth. Clapper bore the end.